There are moments in life when the world seems to hold its breath, when time slows just enough for a single decision to rewrite two very different destinies. On a cold February morning in the city, as the sun struggled to warm the sleeping streets, a shivering woman wrapped in a torn gray blanket approached a polished wooden bench outside a quiet riverside cafe. She hesitated, clutching her worn backpack, her eyes lowered with the practiced humility of someone who had learned not to expect kindness. A man in a tailored black coat sat there, reading between his thoughts more than the newspaper in his hands. When she finally gathered the courage to whisper the question she had swallowed 100 times before, she braced for rejection, but instead he lifted his gaze, softened by something fragile inside, and simply said, "Please do." That single moment, brief, small, but powerful as a spark landing on dry wood, would go on to stitch two fractured lives back together in ways neither of them expected. Before the story continues, viewers, if you believe kindness and second chances can change lives, make sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. The woman's name was Lena. Her life had once been filled with soft colors, laughter echoing from a tiny apartment she shared with her husband and their spirited daughter. But the universe has a way of changing direction without warning. One accident, one late-night call from the highway patrol, and the foundation of her world cracked open. Losing her family pushed her into a spiral of grief so heavy she could barely breathe. She tried to hold on, to her job, to her home, to the fragments of identity left floating around her, but grief doesn't release its grip easily. She slipped through the cracks, moved in and out of shelters, until eventually she found herself on the streets, invisible to the people rushing past her. The man on the bench was named Arman, a millionaire whose success was praised in every business magazine across the country. People admired him for his empire of tech companies and charitable foundations, but very few knew the truth behind his quiet eyes. He had grown up poor, clawing his way out of scarcity with a mixture of talent and relentless drive. Money had come later, but with it came a hollow space he never quite understood. His mother, the woman who had fought every war life threw at her while raising him alone, had passed away just 2 months prior. He wore grief like a heavy overcoat no tailor could mend. That morning, he sat on that bench because it was one of the last places he had visited with her, sharing hot tea and soft laughter. He came there trying to feel close to her, but only silence greeted him. When Lena sat down beside him, she tried to make herself invisible, curling her legs inward, pressing her backpack tight against her chest. She had learned to read the discomfort of strangers long before it was expressed. Yet, something in Arman's presence felt strangely safe. Maybe it was the way he shifted slightly to give her more space without making her feel like a burden. Maybe it was how he didn't look at her with pity or annoyance, but with quiet acknowledgement, as if he understood the language of broken things. The river flowed in front of them, carrying pieces of sunlight across its moving surface. For a few minutes, neither spoke. The city hummed around them, cars passing, footsteps tapping, distant chatter, while they both sat in their own quiet storms. Lena knew she should leave soon and continue searching for a meal before the shelters filled up. She had spent years learning to survive, but there was something about that morning, something about the warmth radiating from that bench that made her pause. Arman eventually folded his newspaper, not because he was finished reading, but because he could sense the weight of the silence around her. He wasn't usually the kind of person to initiate conversations with strangers, yet he found himself speaking softly, asking if she was all right. The question nearly cracked her. No one had asked her that in months. She nodded quickly, embarrassed by the instinct to cry, and stared forward, trying to steady her breathing. What Arman noticed wasn't her worn clothes or the tired lines on her face. It was the way she clasped her hands together as if they were the last anchor she had left. Something in that small gesture reminded him of his mother, the way she used to hold her hands together when she was trying to stay strong for him. The resemblance wasn't physical, it was emotional, a quiet resilience wrapped inside fragile skin. He offered to buy her breakfast, and although every part of Lena wanted to refuse out of pride, her empty stomach made the decision for her. They walked into the riverside cafe where sunlight spilled through glass panels, turning the dust in the air into floating sparks. People stared, some curious, others judgmental, but Arman didn't seem to notice. He guided her to a corner booth where the morning felt a little less cold. As Lena ate slowly, savoring each bite as if it were a memory she didn't want to fade, Arman absorbed the quiet dignity she carried. She didn't ask for anything. She didn't complain. She didn't fill the air with explanations or excuses. She simply existed with a tired grace that humbled him. He wanted to know her story, but he didn't push. People who have been broken don't need interrogations, they need space. But stories sometimes spill without force. A small detail in the cafe, a little girl's drawing taped near the counter, triggered something inside Lena. Without meaning to, she whispered a few lines about her daughter. That opened the door to the grief she had kept buried. Bit by bit, in trembling fragments, her story emerged. She didn't dramatize it. She didn't beg for sympathy. She simply recounted the truth, and the truth alone was enough to shake the air around them. Arman listened with a quiet stillness, the kind that comes from someone who understands loss. His heart tightened, not out of pity, but out of recognition. Pain has a way of echoing across lives, even when the circumstances are different. He saw in Lena not a homeless woman, but a mother who had once held a world in her arms and lost it. After breakfast, Lena thanked him and prepared to leave, expecting nothing more than this brief kindness. But Arman felt a pull, a responsibility he didn't fully understand. He asked where she planned to go, and she shrugged. The streets, probably. The shelter if it wasn't too full. It was said with a kind of resigned acceptance that pierced through him. He offered her a temporary place in one of the women's transitional apartments his foundation managed. It wasn't charity in the performative sense. It was simply a structured program he already funded, with counselors, job placement support, and safe living spaces for women trying to rebuild their lives. She resisted at first. Pride again and fear. People weren't always kind to those who had fallen, but Arman assured her that she wasn't an exception, and she wasn't being singled out. She was just being given access to a resource that existed for people exactly like her. That night, Lena slept in a clean bed for the first time in years. She cried quietly, not from sadness but from the unfamiliar feeling of safety. The apartment smelled faintly of lavender and warm laundry. A small lamp glowed beside the bed, casting gentle light across the room. It wasn't home, but it was a beginning. Weeks turned into months. Lena began attending counseling and working with the program's employment coordinator. She rediscovered parts of herself she thought had died: her determination, her creativity, her ability to care deeply. She started working at a florist shop nearby, where her delicate hands created arrangements that brought joy to people she didn't even know. Each bouquet felt like a silent prayer for healing. Arman checked on her progress occasionally, not out of obligation, but because something about her journey grounded him. His wealth had always given him power, but seeing someone rise from a place so dark reminded him of the strength his mother had always told him he possessed, the strength to lift others. Their connection, formed on that bench grew into a quiet friendship. They healed pieces of one another without forcing it or naming it. Arman slowly learned to let go of the guilt he felt after his mother's passing. Lena learned to live without drowning in grief. Their conversations weren't dramatic or cinematic, they were simple, honest, and consistent. Sometimes that's all healing needs. Near the end of the year, during a small charity event hosted by Arman's foundation, Lena was invited to speak about her journey. She hesitated, nervous that people would judge her past. But when she stepped on stage with shaking hands and looked out at the crowd, she saw Arman standing near the back, giving her a gentle nod of encouragement. She shared her story without embellishment. When she finished, the room erupted in applause, not because she was a tragic figure, but because she was living proof of what human connection could rebuild. Later that evening, she walked with Arman outside into the gentle chill of the night. The river glimmered nearby, carrying echoes of the day they first met. She thanked him quietly, but he shook his head. He said he hadn't saved her. He had simply answered a question. She had done the real work herself. And that was the truth, the beautiful truth. Sometimes all transformation needs is a single moment of grace offered without hesitation. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, and share. Your support helps us reach more people who believe in compassion and hope. Before the ending, I have a special request to comment below what kindness means to you. In the end, Lena built a new life with the resilience of someone who had walked through fire and survived. Arman found peace in knowing he honored his mother's memory not with grand gestures, but with simple humanity. And sometimes, when the morning light shimmered across the river, they found themselves back at that same bench. Two people who had once been strangers, now connected by a single question, answered with unexpected warmth. A reminder that kindness, even in its smallest form, can change everything.